Shadow of the Erdtree only has one ending. A single, decisive conclusion to the journey of our Tarnished through the lands of Shadow. In typical From Software fashion, it answers some of our biggest questions, raises new ones, and adds context to some of the pivotal moments of the base game. With that said, it's a loaded ending that's drawing some big reactions from the community and will surely be the subject of critiques, theory, and analysis for years to come. So before we get into any of that, let's take a fact-focused look at the ending to Shadow of the Erdtree. Upon passing through the fog wall to enter the final boss arena, Miquella calls out from beyond the Divine Gate, praising his blade, Malenia, and the champion of the festival, you, the Tarnished, calling back to the epic duel in Aeonia and the boss battle outside Redmane Castle in Caelid. He says that a vow will now be honored, and that his lord brother's soul has come back, so he can serve as his consort. It's then revealed that somehow Radahn has returned. But it's only somehow if you haven't followed the expansion side quests. Before you reach the Shadow Keep, Miquella breaks his great rune, and in doing so, removes the enchantment that compelled his followers to travel to the lands of Shadow in the first place. It's at this point that things change significantly for the band of Miquella, as they all begin to question their allegiance to the young Empyrean. On the first floor of the Specimen Storehouse, you'll run into Ansbach, who will tell you that he's learned that Miquella's peeps have taken Mohg's body somewhere for an unknown reason. On the fourth floor of the storehouse, you'll find the secret Rite Scroll, which reads, "A scroll made of white tree bark." Few can decipher the scroll, which describes the secret rite of the Divine Gateway, said to be found at the tower enshrouded by shadow. A lord will usher in a god's return, and the lord's soul will require a vessel. In other words, a lord is going to bring back a god through the Divine Gateway, but first, the lord's soul needs a body to inhabit. So we've got two returns here, the return of a lord's soul to a vessel, and the return of a god from beyond the Divine Gateway. Before you bring this scroll back to Ansbach, go to the 7th floor, where you'll find Freya, who's busy searching the tablets for something she's not willing to share with us just yet. Visit Ansbach again, hand him the scroll, and he'll spell things out for you. Miquella is going to use Mohg's body as a vessel for his lord, or more specifically, his chosen king consort. Ansbach will then hand you a letter for Freya, but unlike the secret Rite Scroll, it's sealed, preventing us from reading it. Returning to Freya, she'll be more specific about what she's looking for, information on a vow that Miquella claimed to have made to Radahn. You can then hand her the letter, at which point she'll tell you what it says, that Ansbach has discovered that Miquella intends to revive Radahn. Combining these two discoveries, Miquella's plan is clear, to use Mohg's body as a vessel to bring back Radahn as his Elden Lord, and then for Radahn to bring him back through the Divine Gateway as a god. All of this stems from the vow the young Empyrean supposedly made to the general at some point in the past. So even this early in the DLC, before our Tarnished has even fought Messmer, it's possible to figure out that Radahn will be returning at the end of the expansion, and that Miquella wanted him to serve as his king consort. And that's exactly what happens here at the end of the game. Radahn is back at the peak of his power, having used Mohg's body as a vessel. This probably explains why he's weak to bleed damage. A pro tip for any of you folks still struggling with this insane boss fight. A battle between the Tarnished and Radahn then ensues, during which you can summon Ansbach and Tialie if you finish their quest lines, with the former fighting on behalf of the Lord of Blood and the latter to uphold the last wishes of Saint Trina. Personally, I'd summon them both once so you can see their dialogue and the conclusions to their character arcs, but I wouldn't recommend doing it beyond that, because it gives Radahn an insane amount of extra health in both phases. Once you drop Radahn down to about 60% health, he'll fall to his knees, plunge his swords into the ground, and seemingly activate the Divine Gateway behind him. It's then that Miquella himself returns as a god. Throughout the DLC, the Tarnished can find abandoned pieces of the young Empyrean, both body parts like his eyes and heart, as well as his core ideals, like love. This is speculation, but it appears that Miquella needed to go through the Divine Gateway to be restored to his full glory. He then climbs atop Radahn, Lorien and Lothric style, addresses us as an aspiring lord of the Old Order, and says that if we know sin and grief for this world, in other words, if we know that the Lands Between is a broken, messed up place, then we should bow down to him and Radahn and let them go ahead and fix things. No matter how you slice it, he's right that we are an aspiring lord of an opposing order, and given the endings of the base game, at this point, we really have no choice but to fight him. In 4 of Elden Ring's 6 endings, Marika remains the god of the current age, while the Erdtree gets a fresh coat of paint. In Age of the Stars, Ranni takes Marika's place, and then the two of you peace out to the moon. And in the Frenzied Flame ending, you become the Lord of Chaos and melt it all away. So each of these 6 endings, no matter how different they may be, leads to the rise of an order that stands in opposition to the one Miquella hopes to create. As the Light of Miquella states, Miquella sought to accept all that was and would be, but found one that refused to be embraced. No wonder, as one god and one king consort is all the world needs. In other words, as they say in Highlander, there can only be one. And so it is that our Tarnished defeats a god and a lord in the shadow of the Divine Gateway. Upon reloading the area, you'll discover a memory of Miquella. After touching it, a cutscene will play, showing a younger Miquella telling Radahn that he is going to be a god. This seems to take place after he was chosen as an Empyrean by his 2 fingers. He then asks Radahn if, in the event he holds up his end of an unknown vow, the same vow that Freya mentioned earlier, if he'll agree to become his consort. It's important to note that we never hear Radahn's response. Regardless, Miquella proclaims that he intends to make the world a gentler place, and the memory ends. Further context for this comes from the remembrance of a god and a lord, which reads, "In their childhood, Miquella saw in Radahn a lord, his strength, his kindness that stood in stark contrast with their afflicted selves. And so Miquella made his heartfelt wish, that Radahn would one day be his king consort." So, essentially, Miquella viewed Radahn as the best of the demigods, a dignified lord both strong and kind, and wanted all along for him to be his Elden Lord. This memory concludes the story of Miquella and Shadow of the Erdtree, but as mentioned earlier, and as you can probably tell, this is a pretty loaded sequence of revelations, so it's far from the end of our community's discussion about what happened here. In terms of what Miquella's vow might have been, a common theory is that he promised Radahn a glorious death in battle, as Malenia tried to give him during the Shattering War, and as our Tarnished eventually did at his festival. As for if he responded in the affirmative in the memory, as in whether or not he actually promised Miquella he'd become his consort, that is a topic we will be debating far into the future. Opinions are varied, but based on what I've seen, 4 schools of thought have emerged. Some believe that Radahn did agree to become Miquella's consort, and thus the Battle of Aeonia was a big, bloody going-away party for Radahn's soul. Others concur with this sequence of events, but speculate that Radahn was, at every step of the way, compelled by Miquella, just like Mohg. The third theory is a bit of a twist on both viewpoints, with some suggesting that Radahn might have willingly agreed initially, but backed out of it after the Shattering, or been compelled to agree, but that the spell broke around the same time the Elden Ring did. And finally, there are those who believe that Radahn turned Miquella down, and thus Malenia was sent to Aeonia to kill the general and force him into the Lands of Shadow. I'll be wading into this conversation myself in a future video, where I'll give each point of view their time of day, before explaining which side I personally am on. And given that this plot twist has proven to be controversial, I'll also provide my own opinion on the quality of it at some point as well, during a long-form review of the entire DLC. But for now, that's a wrap on this one. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed your journey through the lands of Shadow as much as I did. There will be much to discuss about Shadow of the Erdtree going forward, so hopefully this explainer video on the ending will serve as a good starting point for all of our discussions. Thanks for watching. Huge thanks to Farewelleon, who's allowed me to use her covers from the Game of Thrones soundtrack, and Alex Rowe, who allows all of us YouTubers to use his incredible remixes from the Soulsborne series for our videos. To check out both of these amazing musicians, just follow the link down below in the description box. Huge shout out to James Pruitt, Corey Madsen, Gustavo Balabi, Little Caesar, Reed, and Pathonian, who get early access to these videos thanks to donations of $5 to $10 a month. See you guys next time!